And what we see in the prophets over and over is that the message that God has is more important than the messenger. And that's where it is with Amos. God puts this burden on him and sends him and says, take my message to my people. And Amos is everywhere graphic. As you read the prophecies of Amos, they are very graphic because he points out the events of daily life in which sin shows itself. Amos represents every believer as they're called to be a witness and an example to other believers. Amos is one who's going to go out before the Lord and carry the burden of the Lord to the people that the Lord loves. And we're going to see what he's going to face through that process, because when you go out and try to tell people in the world that there's things that are right and wrong, there's things that are good and bad, that there's an objective standard of truth, of morals, and people get really, really offended and really hurt by it. And so Amos faces this, and the first thing he faces is someone who tries to discredit him. When we go out in the world, we'll have to understand that people will try to discredit you as a person and the message that you bring. Amaziah says there in verse 10 was a priest of Bethel. He's one that should have known. He's one that should have understood what God says, but he comes and hears Amos's message, and he begins to attack and discredit Amos's character. But those who preach the gospel, as Paul says, the gospel is offensive. The gospel divides people. Jesus said it as well. It came to set father against son and mother against daughter and in-laws against in-laws, which I don't know the gospel needs to do that. I think they do that on their own sometimes. But there's a division there that happens when we preach the truth of the gospel. And that's what Amaziah is trying to do here. He's trying to create division. He says, Amos, you're a conspirator. You're a seller of prophecies. And he sends that message to the king, but that message isn't going to go fast enough, and so he starts to discredit the message itself. We live in a world today that'll tell us that what we believe as Christians that is true from the gospel, that's just our interpretation. It's not really what God says. We really can't say that God is against certain things, because as they'll come back with it and say, well, Jesus never talked about abortion, so therefore it's not a sin. Jesus never talked about homosexuality, so therefore it's not a sin. Jesus never talked about, sex before marriage, so therefore it's not a sin. Like, Jesus never talked about those things, so therefore that's not what the Bible says, therefore we can do what we want. That's not even close to being true. And so they discredit the message and the messenger because they don't want to hear what their Creator has to say.